Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to day 7 of our JavaScript developer class, right? So I'm just going to recap what we talked on yesterday, then talk about what we're going to do today before we go into what we have for today. Yesterday we looked at HTML DOM. Okay, we went over it for the second time. We already talked about it on Monday, but we went over HTML DOM yesterday and saw how we could use some useful methods to kind of change content on the HTML page, right? Sometimes based on conditions from our JavaScript file, or just based on maybe our requirement or what we wanted to do, right? And I guess everyone can see my data, right? So we played around with a little application, and we kind of saw practically how DOM manipulation is being used, right? So we changed contents, we got the value of form elements, and used event listeners, right? So we talked about event listeners. So we picked up values of elements based on events. So when a button is clicked, we'll pick up the value of two fields, then run a function, then manipulate the DOM, right? So we looked at all those yesterday. We looked at like practical, like using DOM manipulation in practical, right? So same thing, we looked at CSS and all, right? So these are all what we did yesterday. And if you can just go back and practice to just solidify what we did, right? Again, we talked about events, right? So I talked about events, click event, hover event, and all of that, right? So events are just like how events allows JavaScript to react to HTML element, right? I want to just use 10, 15, or 20 minutes to talk about events again today, right? From another angle, because we can just give some practical examples about it. Then I'll talk about some other stuff, maybe some stuff I missed. Then I still want to talk about comparisons, conditions, and loops, right? So we talked about this earlier, I think last week, but I think I explained, we did all of them together and like quite kind of compressed them. So I want to talk more about them. Then we're going to do again, like yesterday, we're going to kind of solve another practical maybe use case of everything with length, right? But this time, I think we're going to use loops. We're going to use conditions and comparisons and loops, right? So previously, yesterday, we used events for our little program. So let me just go live on this. I'm going to click on go live. Yeah, so this little first number multiply divide stuff we did, right? We used events, functions, and let's say DOM manipulation, right? So today we're going to see how we can use loops, comparisons to just create something that we can understand, okay? So let's just go into what we have on the list for today. And again, if you have any questions whenever I'm explaining something, you can just raise your hands and I'm going to take your questions, right? Okay, so I'm just going to go to events. I'm going to explain a little bit more on events again before we move forward, right? So we've seen how the DOM works yesterday. We looked at DOM in depth yesterday, right? So HTML DOM allows JavaScript to react to HTML events, right? So the DOM, like what event just does, let me refresh. What event does, it allows what event does, what the DOM does, it allows JavaScript listing on specific events, and we can carry actions, right? We saw that. Yeah. Please, can we just stay muted? Hello, manage. Okay. Yeah, so I've lost track of what I was saying, right? So events, right? So we used event yesterday to kind of do some of the tasks we did, right? So So JavaScript events, DOM allows JavaScript to react to HTML events, right? Okay, I wanted to show something, right? So this is an example of how we use event, right? So this is the syntax for adding event. Basically, what it just does is it allows you run a piece of code whenever an event is fired, right? So again, I said elements, like syntax, like this is the syntax, right? Elements, method or function, then what you want to listen on, then this function, right? So again, I can just make this a little bit understandable. Let me see. Let me comment out this whole code above. Then let's say we are working with this, right? I can make this a little bit understandable and just take off this function, right? Then I'm going to come here and create a function named divide event, right? I spelled that right. Yeah, event. So if I copy this and just do like, I'm just trying to make it a little bit descriptive, right? So this is, and to add an event, this is the syntax, right? So the elements, the method, event you want to list, an event you want to listen on, then a function that is going to run every time the event is fired, right? So if I undo this, you're going to see that we just had coded the function there, but this is how it works, right? Every time there's a click on this button, so let me see one. So anytime there's a click on this button, it fires this function. So even if we click that button 100 times, it still fires this function, right? So you can do stuff like in our case, we just ran a little calculation. You can do stuff, maybe change CSS, fetch resource from the API. It depends on what you want to do, right? So I'm just going to go ahead. A JavaScript can be executed when an event occurs, right? Like when a user clicks on an HTML element. So a JavaScript means a function and whatever manipulation you want to carry out, right? So to execute code when a user clicks an element, add JavaScript code to an HTML event attribute. Okay, I said on Monday, there are 3 ways to kind of use event listeners, right? So the first one is adding on click directly on the HTML element, right? So I'm just going to clear this. Let's try do what we just did directly on the HTML, right? So I can come here and say, and say on click, run this function, right? Where I have to declare the function in the HTML file. Or let me see. I am going to comment this out since we want to do it directly on the HTML file. Excuse me first. I'm just trying to show you the 3 ways to kind of to use the on click, right? I'll comment this out. I'll comment the whole JavaScript, then write a script stack directly and paste in function, right? Divide event, right? See on click divide events, right? Okay. I'm going to just do the same for okay, that was multiply. Just give me a minute. X. I'm going to name this multiply events. I'm going to create the function multiply events. I hope everyone can see or understands what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to do this directly on the HTML file so I can show you how, show you that we can do this directly on the HTML, right? So if I save this now, so okay, as you can see, let me just write it down. There are 3 ways to kind of use event listeners, right? On click directly on the HTML element, then on click on the elements, on the reference of the elements in JavaScript, then add events listener, right? So we're going to go over the 3 of them again. Let me see. So if I go here and save this now, right? it should still have the same behavior, right? 2 multiplied by 2. First number is not defined. Okay. I'm going to just bring in our whole variables, right? Just copy our variables and put it in our script here. Okay. I should save this now. This should work, right? So to multiply. Multiply is not a function. Multiply. I guess first number, first move result. Okay, I didn't bring my functions. Sorry. Put it up here. It doesn't matter. So again, we're going to try again to multiply, right? So this was just what I was trying to do. You can use the on-click, you can use event listeners directly on the HTML page, right? So long you know what you're doing and you have all your JavaScript code in your script tag, in your HTML file. So I can as well test divide and still play around with it. Our event listener will still work, right? So examples of HTML events. Ola, you want to ask a question?
I was just trying to cue, but since you give me the opportunity now. So with the DOM explanation, like maybe you started on Monday, I want to ask a fundamental question because with the arrangement of the functions and the JavaScript and everything, I'm not really sure if the arrangement matters because sometimes, like for example now, you put the function even after the click button. Is that supposed to work? Because I would still go back to my knowledge of previous programming language. It has to be like a kind of consecutive. You have to like declare a function before you can use it. But now you are putting the function after the on click. Is that
this function here, right?
Like go to the JavaScript. JavaScript explains better. Yeah. Now, initially you put the on click. Where's the on?
Let me just undo so we go back to what we had yesterday.
No, today I just saw that today. I saw that today. It was a code you did today.
Okay, let me see. Let me show you what you're looking for. Where I removed the function.
Before, like, okay, maybe I can give an example. Like normally, say Python or R, you have to say maybe declare a function or you have calculated a function before you can use that very particular function. Yeah, now here, for example, here, exactly. You see, you first put the divide button first before putting the function. But normally the way like I am familiar with is you first declare this function, let it load into memory, then you now declare what will use that function.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, right? Like you said, it's a very fundamental question, right? So there's what we call hoisting in JavaScript. I think I didn't talk about it. It's called JavaScript hoisting, right? So hoisting is JavaScript default behavior of moving declarations to the top. Okay, so if I come here, even if I declare 105 variables, right? Let x equals 50. Declare an array const chars, that spell const chars equals sub and so on and so forth, right? When the browser or the JavaScript interpreter loads this file, it takes all the declaration. It's called JavaScript hoisting, right? It takes this variable, this function, whatever function that was declared variable object, it takes all of them to the top in memory, right? Before it runs the code. So no matter the order, though it's always best practice, right? So I was just kind of playing around. It's always best practice to put all your declaration. If you can see, I think I did it here, right? To put all your declarations at the top. But in JavaScript, JavaScript hoisting moves everything to the top before it runs the program.
Now,
right?
the source of my confusion. Have you finished the explanation?
Yeah.
Of my confusion. Now, if you go back to that, to your code, to VS Code. Now, say you declare, you say let x equals, say, y plus 2. Then you now declare y after that. Is that possible?
Yes.
Then you now declare y after that.
Like this, right?
Yeah, does that work?
Yeah, so in memory, it takes all this, like it brings x, like it brings y up. Sorry, I told you, okay, we saw that JavaScript reads codes, like if it reads from left to right, it kind of calculates or runs this code in memory before it assigns to y. So if it sees y plus 2, it will first declare, in fact, it has already declared everything above, right? Then you just add 6 to 2. It's just called JavaScript hoisting. It does it under the hood. But again, so it's best practice to just create all your functions and variables at the top.
The thing is, you create it at the top or you don't create it at the top. It's still like doesn't address like the question. Though I think you've addressed the question, but you creating this particular let x and Coco, declaring them at the top, doesn't really like address it in terms of JavaScript in general. Because
I like I said, we have something called hoisting, right? I was just telling you it's best practice. Like if I'm writing my programs, I always do them at the top. So I was just trying to do some stuff. That's why I did this, right? So, but just know if you're writing JavaScript, that strict rule you have from Python or R doesn't apply to JavaScript. JavaScript hoists everything, like takes everything to the top.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just go back to our events. Events, right? So I showed us the first way, right? There are 3 ways to use what's it called? Event listeners, right? Firstly, you can append it directly on the HTML elements, which you just see that our program still works, right? I already tested it. Then the second way is to call the onClick on the element, right? So I'm just going to undo all this and see. Let me get back to how this file was. So I'll just have only HTML on this file. Yeah, so this should be it then. I'll go back to my JavaScript and try to get back to the state where we were. Just 1 minute. This is Control Z. Okay, so I've showed you how to kind of use it directly on the HTML element. Now I can use it in JavaScript, but without using the add event listener, right? So I have a reference to the 2 buttons, right? The multiply button, which is this button, and the divide button, which is this button, right? So I'm just going to comment these 2 codes that uses add event listener and just use the second method, right? Let me see, they show the second method here. Okay, so this is still the inline. And okay, yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. So the HTML allow you to assign events to HTML element using JavaScript, right? So this is the other way to assign a function on the reference of the element, right? So we've already done our document.get elements by ID multiply button. So all I have to do here is just to do multiply button dot onClick equals to this function, right? So let me just copy this. Give me 1 minute. I'm just going to copy this and paste it, right? So if I do this, it should give us the same, what's it called? The same behavior, right? So I'm just going to try 2 multiplied by 2. It should still give us 4, okay? 1, you can use it directly on the element. 2, you can add a function to the reference of the element, right? Again, how we got this my multiply button is we got the reference of the HTML element, right? Our multiply button, then added an onClick, then gave it a function. Then the last one is what we all know, or what we used yesterday rather, is calling the add event listener method on the HTML element, right? So the three of them does the same thing, but it's always cleaner to use this because it just gives you what we call abstraction. Like you can just maybe reuse the same functions for different event listeners and do stuff like that. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to our events and try to play around with other events before we move forward, right? So basically we've just been playing around with just click, right? So I told us there are other events, the unload and unload events. So I figure when the user enters or leaves the page, right? There are so many fun things you can do, right? So when the page finishes loading, you can display a form or a picture or something. The unload event can be used to check the visitor's browser type and version. So this is just a little bit when you start building complex application. The unload event can be used to deal with cookies. So the unchanged event is often used in combination with input fields, right? So I'm just going to play around with this now so you can see a practical use case of this, right? So I'm just going to go to our input field, and on our input field, I'm going to add an unchanged event, right? Or let me do it in JavaScript. Again, you can do all of them directly on the element, right? So I'm going to go to JavaScript, get a reference of our first number element, and just do first number dot add event listener change. I'm going to directly embed the function in it and just say I'll just console log it right now, right? So we can see console.log first number dot value, right? So if I save this and go to our file, whatever I type, okay, it's not getting that. Let me see why. Console.log, let me say hello and see why this is not working. Sorry. Okay, unchange first number. Okay, so that's weird. It's used to in combination evaluation input. Let me see if I got the spelling right. So there's no unchange here. Why? There should be an unchange. So let me try add it to the elements directly. Change cause handle change, right? Then I'm just going to create a function that says function handle change. So let me see. Still not working, right? Yeah, but you can just let me see, enter your name. When you leave the input field, function which transform the input text to uppercase. Okay. All right. It works now, but I was expecting a different behavior, right? So what the unchanged event does, right? So once this element is changed and I like take off my mouse, the function is going to be fired. I was expecting it to output on every input, right? So that's just like you have to maybe understand what you want to use does, and you're going to have to kind of use it for your use case, right? So another very familiar or kind of another event you'll be using a lot is on mouse over, right? So you can do stuff when a user like kind of takes his mouse over an element, right? So this is on mouse over. I don't want to type it all over again, but we can see on mouse over, right, directly on the element. So on mouse over, move this. So it's just kind of calling these two functions, right? Move over, move out, right? So it's changing the elements of the inner HTML of the element whenever you do stuff, right? So these are just kind of stuff you can do with event listeners. You can come around and play with it. So on mouse down or mouse up, you can do stuff, right? So again, they might just look like we're just doing one thing, but when we start, like maybe when there's a use case for them, or when we start reading programs that needs them, you're going to see like the power of knowing about events and event listeners, right? So I'm just going to kind of, yeah, we already talked about this. So basically, right, I just wanted to go over event listeners again and show you the 3 ways to kind of use event listeners, right? Directly on the HTML element here, then by calling the onClick on the reference to the elements, then using the add event listeners method, right? So event listeners and DOM work hand in hand, and they are two very powerful stuff you're going to have to get familiar with if you want to build programs, right? So there's a question I was expecting and no one has asked me. So the same way you can add event listeners, right? So if I do this times this, what if I want to remove this, right? Or what if, let's say, I only want to do it once, right? I only want to listen on an event once, right? You can add many event listeners to the same elements, right? That's another topic. And we can remove an event listener, right? So let me see if it's here. Yeah, so there's a function called remove event listener, right? So let's say maybe we have a program and we've kind of, let's say in here, I've done what I want after the button has been clicked. So let me just do a speaker example. Once you click the divide button once, I'm going to remove the event listener. So I don't want it to work again. So I'm going to do remove event listener, right? Let me see what parameters. Let me see. I know I'm going to pass in click. Let's see, mouse over my function. Okay, so I'm still going to pass in the function, right? So if I want to remove event listener, right? So document or remove event listener, then I want to remove the click events, then I'll have to pass in that function I passed, right? But again, I had coded the function here. So that's one importance of kind of abstracting the function, right? So if I had done this, maybe created the function outside, I would have been able to do that easily. But again, you can remove event listeners by calling the same thing. Remember when we added the event listener, we did element.add event listener, click, then the function. If you want to remove it, you call remove event listener, then the name of the event, then that same function. So it will just remove that function from the element, right? So I think I'm done with events. I just wanted to point out those 3 ways you can kind of use events with the DOM, right? So Sagal, you have your hands up if you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, Sammy. Yeah, I don't have a question. It's more of like a request if it's possible. I think that, I mean, I can speak for myself. I feel like this whole DOM thing is a bit, I mean, understanding that it is an object is okay. It has properties, things like that. But, you know, adding events, things are becoming a little bit blurry. So I was wondering just if for classes like that, meaning like when the concept is really hard, not really hard, but like it's not as easy to get. If in those classes, then in that time, for example, for this one, if you can use 1 hour for lecture and 1 hour for practice and asking you questions. I was just wondering, just for only like big things like this one, I think. But I just wanted to ask if that's possible. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Sagal. Okay, thanks for the suggestion, right? So I try to always come back to stuff I think or I feel is hard the next day, right? So I think this is the 3rd day, or this is the, yeah, we started talking about events from Monday, right? So if we talk about it and I go back maybe after the lesson and I see, oh, this is a little bit complex and vast, I'm going to bring it back maybe the next day, right? So maybe and it's because I'm writing down maybe like a bunch of topics and I'm going over them every time. I always try to go back, right? But I am going to see how to put that into consideration, right? So for example, I'm going back to comparisons because I saw that I saw it from another angle, right? So for total beginners, for people that haven't used loops, comparisons, right? There are some stuff that I didn't talk about or I didn't show to you guys from some angle, right? I'm going to talk about it today. So we're going to do that. I'm still going to revisit a whole lot of stuff. Then we'll have more time to practice maybe towards the end of the class and the tutorials. So again, I introduced solving like an issue. I think for every class, I'll solve a real life case scenario or a real life program. Okay, so but I'll put your suggestion into consideration. Thanks.
Sammy, I think just to clarify my suggestion is it's more like, when things are hard and then adding to, I thought that maybe we're gonna do more about DOM, adding to this other before understanding fully, adding on top of it. That's what I was thinking. So if you're going back to these, I think it's gonna be fine. Maybe, I don't know, tutorial, maybe, hopefully we can cover DOM.
Yeah, we're going to cover them again during tutorials.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Adele. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to some things I skipped because I was trying to just get some basics on the floor, right? So I'm going to go to some little concepts that we're going to be using over and over again, right? Before I do the exercise I want to do. So I'm going to go to string, JS string templates, right? So last week let me close this. So last week we played around with variables, data types, like the first week, right? We talked about strings, numbers, string methods, right? And so far, whenever we're trying to concatenate strings, we talked about string concatenation, right? Or combine strings and variable. We always do something like this, right? Maybe let's my name equals Sammy. I'm typing JavaScript directly into my console. I explain how we can do this, right? Then I'll do console.log my name is, then plus a variable, right? So I'm sure everyone might have seen me or might have used this, right? So let me put in a space here. My name, right? So this is called string concatenation, right? So I was adding strings by using a plus sign, but JavaScript has a better way to do it, right? It's called JavaScript template literals, right? So for exercises you're going to be doing, it's to really help kind of ease your life, because let's say you have maybe some calculations to do, then add strings to variables, you're going to be writing the plus sign a whole lot, right? So you can call them template literals, string template strings, string templates, and backtick syntax, right? So this is the syntax, right? Let me go back. So initially I said the two ways to create a string in JavaScript is to use the double quotes or single quotes, right? But there's the last one you can also use called template literals. It's called the backticks, right? So it's just the symbol above your tab key. If you're on your computer, or if you're looking for it, is the symbol above your tab key. Maybe keyboard, your keyboard layout might be different, but before the number 1 and above your tab, you have backticks, right? So backticks also creates a string. So if I do Sam and I output name, it's still going to give me Sam as a string. But I'm just going to talk about the flexibility you have with using backticks, right? So if I go to the lesson, so quotes inside string, right? So previously, I already cleared my history, right? So I'm going to output name. Yeah, so previously I told you if you're declaring a string or a variable and you say today's, and you try to do, let's say you declare with a single quote and you try to do today's date is So you're going to fall into, these are some kind of issues you're going to fall into while using normal quotes and double quotes and single quotes, right? You can't repeat the quotes in itself. So if I change this to double quotes and I try to use double quotes inside this string, it's going to break, right? Because JavaScript will think I'm ending this string here. It doesn't pick this, right? So the switching with template literals, if I use template literals, I can use double quotes, single quotes, and whatever type of quotes I want to use inside this string, and it's not going to break my code. Again, we can use quotes inside the backtick strings, and I can create a sentence, right? I can use multi-line, right, with backticks, right? So I can maybe like break, and still write stuff. It will still all be in the strings, right? So this is kind of a more powerful way to write strings. But the major use of backticks, or why I want to talk about backticks, is what we call string interpolation, right? So if I have a variable, I think I still have a variable in memory here called my name, right? I have my name, I have name. So if I want to create another variable, full name, initially I will do name plus maybe space plus my name, right? Yeah, and it's going to give me full name with a space in it. But with string interpolation, I can do full name equal to, okay, we're going to see a new syntax now. With string interpolation, I can add variables without using the plus sign, right? So I can do full name. I can do my full name. My full name is, so rather than using plus sign, I can use what we call string interpolation, right? So this is the syntax. If I do this, I put in my previous variable with a space, put in another string interpolation, and put in my other variable. So let me just explain what I did here, right? So with backticks, template literals, I can add strings and variables without having to use the plus sign. And I can do that like I'm writing a sentence, right? So if you can see, I said my full name is, this is the string interpolation way of saying insert this variable here and insert this variable here and add a space between them. I can choose to do comma, the second name, and put a comma also, right? So template literal just gives you the ability to kind of not always have to do plus, space, plus, plus, plus. You can just write strings and variables in the same string. Can you please mute? Thank you. Right. So if I hit enter now, so let me just take out the comma signs. If I hit enter, we're going to see it provided my full name is this variable. If you can see, as you can see here, the value of this variable name is Sam, and the value of my name variable is Sammy, right? So basically, string literals or backticks gives you more power while dealing with strings, right? So maybe if you're creating just text, you can just use double quote or single quotes, right? But if you want to do something, maybe in a function, right? You want to return first name and last name, you want to return or calculate maybe the sum of this, you want and add a variable, and you don't use the plus sign, you can always use string literals, right? And again, I can put in functions in it, right? If I have a function, or let's say I can run calculations in it, right? I can do 1 plus 1. It just gives you a space to write JavaScript or output a variable in a code, right? So string literals are more powerful than actual double quote strings or single quote strings. Okay. Shalom. Hi, Shalom. Shalom, you want to ask a question?
Hi, Sammy. Yes, I wanted to.
Yeah.
Sammy, so my question would be, so this is getting interesting, and I just wanted to know, so like with HTML, I think we didn't do everything, like we just went to like the stuff that we would basically really come across or need. So I was wondering with Java, are we going to go through the entire thing on the W3 schools? Is it something that we would run into
Okay.
as developers, or there's just some things that are phased out? Because I think like the VAR and VAR has been phased out so far. I mean, it's still working, but it's not really something that is still being used. So I don't know if there's some stuff like that that has been phased out. And I mean, what should we really focus on? I mean, I was following up till we brought in the DOM, and I'm I'm trying to get a hang of it now. So after DOM, do we still have others like? Basically,
Okay.
are we gonna have to go through all of this stuff here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice of you to ask, right? So cool question. Um, Basically everything we have here are just are concepts, right? And all these concepts are the same in most programming languages, right? Just a few that are particular to JavaScript, right? And no, we can't, I am not going to go through all of them, right? So it's maybe sometimes when questions come up, I'm just going to say, oh, it's here, this is it, this is hoisting, this is JSON, this is modules, right? So to answer your question clearly, we can't go through all of it, right? I've already picked up like basically everything we are going to go over. So everything we are going to encounter maybe in Salesforce development, because the variables, functions, objects, it might be called different things in Salesforce, but the concepts are still the same. So basically after this week, maybe after DOM, what we'll be doing is going back and reusing all this stuff. We've even started using like kind of doing exercises, right? So after maybe this week or after DOM and events, we'll just keep on going back and be doing all this stuff to just make it concrete, right? We can't do all of it. We won't need all of it, but we've picked out basically everything that's all the concepts that we're going to see in Salesforce, and we're just going to keep on doing it, right? So the string literals, the DOM, again, DOM is particular to just JavaScript, right? Because JavaScript is a language for the web. But the thing is, your learning won't be complete, right? If you just go through JavaScript, you learn HTML and CSS, and maybe you don't know how to kind of effectively use the power of JavaScript to just play around with maybe your web page, right? Even if we're going to use little of it in Salesforce, because Salesforce has its own Salesforce has its own syntax and maybe language to kind of create stuff on the web page, right? So to answer the question fully, we can't do, I won't even try to do everything here because 1 month won't be enough and we will not need all of this. We can't do, but if you notice, I've just been focusing on the key concepts, objects, data types. Every language has data types. Every language has arrays. Every language has loops, comparisons, and conditions, and those are just what we've been on. So if DOM took you a little bit off balance, don't worry, we're still going to do that in tutorials, but you won't mostly need them in Salesforce development, but you still do a little bit of DOM manipulation. Is that okay, Sharon?
Yeah, that answers that question. That was relieving. The other thing is, so say apart from like Salesforce, wanting to be like a Salesforce developer, say I wanted to go in depth with becoming a developer, would it, what's the ideal stuff? Would it still make sense to learn this entire thing? Is it applicable not just to Salesforce now? Would it be applicable to all of the stuff listed here? Is it something that I would see recurring or more often as a developer? Not a Salesforce developer, now like a software developer. All of the stuff listed here, would it be something that I would have to encounter? Or it's just specific ones?
Yeah. If you want to be an actual software engineer, not not like a path to Salesforce, right? You have not like you have to, you need to, or you should know most of what is here, right? And this is not the Little School, just kind of, it's like I said, it's a basic learning platform for beginners, right? These are just mainly basics. There are more, but you need to know classes, functions, like some other programming concepts, right? So to answer your question, you should know all this if you want to become an actual JavaScript developer. But for the part we are taking, Salesforce, we don't need to get into all this. We shouldn't get into all this. But if you want to actually go into software engineering, you should know all this as a JavaScript developer.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Sagal?
Oh yeah, hi Sammy. So now Shalom's question triggered me like to think about something else. So now that we're talking about Salesforce, for the JavaScript, what about Visual Force? It is made in JavaScript, right?
Can you come again?
Visual Force
Yeah.
pages in
Yeah.
Salesforce. Do
Yeah.
we need like a lot of JavaScript?
No, you don't need a lot of JavaScript, right? So Visual Force pages, I think, okay, I don't know if Botope is going to dwell on Visual Force pages. Lightning components and Visual Force pages, it has built in to kind of do whatever I want to do and output maybe HTML or content on the page. You're just going to need little JavaScript to kind of play with data and communicate with your Salesforce org.
Okay, but not like DOM, like, or more like a very, how do I say?
Not
like that. Okay,
Majorly
great.
functions, variables, like just getting data and outputting data, sending data back to Visual Force. So we're going to learn all that when we get to Salesforce, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah. So I just wanted to show you how template literals works, but it just figures some stuff. We're going to use template literals maybe moving forward. So I just wanted to show you how this works. You can use template literal, you can use variables in template literals and maybe run calculations in it, right? Okay. I am going to go into the next thing, Booleans, comparisons, conditions, and loops, right? We've looked at this, and I just felt I should come back to it because it's if you can remember when Roberto Beck came, he kind of stressed on this, right? So these are kind of the basic things we just need to know before we get to Salesforce development. And I just want to go over them again in case anyone here doesn't get any of these concepts, right? And we're going to be using it for most of our exercises. Comparisons, conditions, and loop, right? So if I just start with Booleans before we go to the next one. So let me just go back to Booleans, right? So Booleans and comparisons kind of work hand in hand, or in fact, Booleans are a very, very, very like good background of whatever we're going to do with conditions, loops, and comparisons, right? Because a value has to be true or false for our statement to even, maybe for our condition to kick in or our statement to even be in effect, right? So a JavaScript Boolean represents one of two values, true or false. So if there's no Boolean or there's no true or false, I think it's going to be difficult to write programs, right? Because we work with true or false values. If user is a subscriber, if user is a developer, if this person is from this location, it always returns true or false, right? So Booleans are very important parts of whatever we're going to do as programmers, right? So very often in programming, you will need a data type that can only have one of two values, like yes or no, on or off, or true or false, right? So for the JavaScript has a Boolean data type, it can only take the values true or false. So basically, right, this is just trying to let you know that in maybe Flow, okay, just like how we have Flow in Salesforce, most of what we do, maybe you pick a field, pick equal to, not equal to, maybe a value. All those are just kind of true or false. So if the first criteria and the second criteria match, so that is true, then the flow kicks in or the workflow kicks in. So all of those kind of just rest on the bedrock of Booleans, right? JavaScript has a Boolean function to check that. So you can use the Boolean function to find out if an expression or a variable is true. So I've been doing it directly on my console previously, right? I was doing 10 is greater than 2, it should return true. But I can also do Boolean, maybe most times in your code. I think we will also play around with this. Boolean, I can do 10 is greater than 2. It's also the same thing, right? So what it just does, Boolean is just a function to just help you maybe add strict comparison to whatever you're doing here. But again, because this browser has a JavaScript compiler or a JavaScript runtime engine, is doing it for us directly out of the blue, right? So I'm just going to go back to our lesson. The Boolean function just kind of helps you check if a value is true or false. We're going to see them, comparisons and conditions are even here. So the three of them are intertwined, right? Booleans, comparisons, conditions. So the JS chapter comparator gives a full overview of comparisons, right? Excuse me. The equal operator, we talked about this. Description equal to, example, if day equals Monday. So day is a variable. If the value of day and Monday are the same, this evaluation is going to evaluate to true, right? So these are one of the importance of Booleans, right? So it only returns a Boolean value, right? True or false. If it's true, we use it to run a calculation, right? So just like, so I think I can take this off now. Just like how we've seen when we were using, let me see, let's day equals word, day, yeah. Then I can just do if day equals to Monday, stuff, right? We've done something with conditionals, right? Else, so I'm sure this will evaluate to false, do other stuff, right? So if there are no Booleans, we will not be able to achieve this, right? So this evaluates to true, and if it's false, it gets to this block, right? And let's just go ahead. So there's a greater than. So all these are comparison operators, right? The equal sign, the greater than, less than. We're going to see more in the next chapter, right? So here's why I opened this Boolean lesson, right? So we can just, because you need to understand the behavior of comparisons, right? You need to understand what should return true. Maybe when you're writing your programs, what should return false, what is not false, or what is not true, right? So in JavaScript, everything with a value is true, right? So everything with a value is true. One is true. String of a dot is true. A full or an object is true, an array is true, as long as it has a value, it's true, right? So 100 is true, 3.1 minus 15, hello, false, as long as, even if it's a string. So if I do false equals true, no, not string, true, evaluated false, we converted, let me just do equal sign. It has a value, so it should be equal to true. Okay, this is fine. So Boolean, let me just use the example. Even the string false is true. Yeah, so sorry, I was supposed to use Boolean. It has a value, so it should evaluate to true. Yeah, false is true, right? So this was kind of giving me another thing. So everything that has a value has a text. So this text is a character, right? Is true, right? So in JavaScript, when you're running your comparison, maybe when you're doing a program, you're trying to check if salary is greater than 0 or if salary is equal to this, you need to maybe have in your head or know what evaluates to true and what does not evaluate to true, right? So everything with a value is true, everything without a value is false, right? So 0 is false, minus 0 is false, an empty string is false, right? So maybe when we get to building, maybe if you're building a form, and you're trying to kind of confirm user input, you can check if the user input, right? Maybe if this our first number input has an empty string, it's going to be false. It means the person did not put in any value, right? So 0 is false. And maybe minus 0 or minus 0, yeah, minus 0 is also false. So anything with a value is true, right? So this is helpful when you're writing programs that checks comparison, right? And we're going to be doing some exercises to prove that. So anything 0 is false. So maybe if you want to check a user's, let me not say age, because age can hardly be 0. If you finish running the calculation, you want to check if person's account balance, if it's 0, you should know that 0 should evaluate to false, and you put your truthy condition or whatever code you want to run if that comparison evaluates to true. Okay. So undefined is false. We talked about undefined as a data type. Undefined means nothing. So if I do, let me clear this. Let's x, think I've defined. So x is undefined. This is, I just declared the variable. I haven't assigned any value to the variable, right? So if I do Boolean x, it should show me false because there's nothing in x. So those are just what you face undefined and null most times while running comparison, right? And false, the Boolean value false is false. It's quite obvious, right? So the reason why I opened this, right, is to just show you that whenever you're running your comparisons, by comparisons, I mean, whenever you're doing an if statement or you're just trying to check if this is this, if that is that, just know in JavaScript, anything with a value is true, anything without a value is false. It's just as simple as that. None is false, right? So I'm not going to go into Booleans as object. So that's what I just wanted to show, right? So you can just know that, and you're going to have a smooth experience creating comparisons, right? So I'm just going to go to comparisons and show how all these stuff work, right? Comparisons and logical operators. So these are all the comparisons we have in JavaScript, right? Comparison operators are used in logical statements to determine equality or difference between variables or values, right? I'm quite sure if you're here, you might have played around with all this, be it in Salesforce or be it here, but I'm not going to just assume that everyone is familiar with all this, right? But if you're not familiar with all this, so these are just comparison operators to use to check, test two values, right? So you can test if two values are the same. You can test if two values are the same with value and type. I explained this to someone the last time. Someone asked what's the difference. So this just checks for value. This checks for value and type, right? So there's not equal to, there's not equal to value and type, greater than, less than, and stuff like that. I think we're going to use this today, right? So how can it be used? They are mostly used with conditionals. When you hear conditionals, conditionals are done with if statements. There's a different way to write conditions. We have the switch and the ternary operator, right? But we're just going to mainly work with if statement because it's the most common and is what we're going to see in other programming languages, right? So conditions can be written with if statement, right? 10 is greater than 0. Yeah, so they are comparison operators and they are logical operators, right? So logical operators are used to determine the logic between variables or values, right? So if I had maybe x is equal 8, for example, let me just go back. So let me use x equal to 8, right? And I want to check if x is greater than 8. So x is not greater than 8. So this should evaluate false, right? So what I just did, I just used comparison operators, right? So where logical operator comes in, I can combine two comparisons and get another Boolean value, right? I can do the same way we have in Salesforce in our criteria, right? You can like kind of fill in one line and it will show and. You can just put in multiple lines, right? So I can decide to make this and. So the Salesforce just has like that what we did previously was just like maybe a graphical user interface, right? So behind the scene, if you're writing this by hand, you're going to do and let's say x is less than 10. So we just used a logical operator to check for two comparisons, right? So we did if x is greater than 8 and x is less than 10. So this comparison or this condition will only result to true if these two things are true, right? So there's another one, there's or. Again, you can say if this is true or if this is true, right? So maybe you can come here and just play around here, right? So and example, if x is less than 10 and y is greater than 1 is true. So the both of them has to be true. For all, just one of them should result to true and your code is going to fire, right? Not does like not is if X is equal, so this is just the opposite of a truth value, right? Not is just negating it, right? So I've kind of talked about this, comparing different types. I don't want to just to stress on it, but if it's still a little bit blurry for you, you can just come here and play around with it. So I'm going to talk about conditions. Then we're going to, like we did yesterday, we're going to build or kind of create a program from a practical use case, right? So the one I picked today has allows us to use comparisons and conditions, right? So I'm just going to go to conditions again and talk about conditional statements. So very often we write code, you want to perform different actions, right? So you can use conditional statements in your code to do this. So we have the if statement, else if statement, and switch statement, right? I didn't talk about the switch. We're not going to still talk about it today. Maybe we'll talk about it some other time. But basically, right, you're going to be writing if statements 50% of the time, like, let me not say 50, right? Like large amount of percentage of your time as a programmer, right? So if else, or else if, right? So there are three of them, right? And I explained them the last time. Else if this, right? So basically, let me just put in through so this stuff will go out. Yeah, so basically, right, unreachable code detected. So basically, right, the if statement, like we just saw previously, can run comparisons and logical operators here, right? So if a statement is true, whatever code you write here gets run, right? So if a statement is true, remember true and false values. If a statement is true, this block of code gets fired. You can have functions, you can do stuff here and manipulate the DOM. If it's not true and you still want to check with another, for example, we normally check X is equals 10. So if it's not 10 and you still want to check against another value, you can use the else if command, right? So if we didn't have the else if here, if X is not equals to 10, it automatically falls to the else statement. So it's either true or false. But like I said, if you want to check against another value, you can use the else if and check for the second value. So if it's not 10, I can undo else if X is equals 9. So if it's not 9, I can keep on changing the else if is until I'm done with maybe whatever I want to catch, then I'll leave it to fall to the else block. But the concept I want you to get is the if statement is the truth, like the code, the first code that gets run if your condition is true. Else if is if this first if statement fails, is going to check against another comparison. If you notice, the else statement doesn't have a condition, like a comparison, like call it a bracket to put in comparison, right? Because else is false, like anything else, not necessarily false, yeah, false or anything else falls back to S, right? So again, the syntax is if true, it runs this block of code. Else, if it's not this condition and you want to check another condition, you can check another condition. If it gets to true, you run this block of code. The else block doesn't have a parenthesis for you to add a condition, a comparison, because it just assumes, oh, everything you've checked is false, so just run this block of code. Okay. So the if statement, the F statement, the else if statement, right? I've talked about three of them. So I'm just going to take questions now. I think some persons have their hands. Then we're going to go into building something with those three comparisons and logical operators, right? If you have any questions, you can just raise your hands up based on like the conditional operators. Shalom, you can go ahead and ask a question.
Sorry, I just didn't lower my hand. Let me lower it. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, cool stuff. So I want us to kind of do something like we did yesterday, right? So we will just kind of read meaning or understand practically what we are learning, right? So yesterday we worked on this, right? So write a JavaScript program to calculate days left. Okay, no, not this, sorry, until next Christmas. No, not that. We worked on write a JavaScript program to calculate multiplication and division of two numbers, right? So we did this, and I guess everyone has a code and maybe some persons played around with it, right? I want us to kind of do this, but because it involves using comparison operators, right? So I'm just going to read the problem. So write a JavaScript program where the program takes a random integer between 1 to 10, right? The user is then prompted to impute a guess number. If the user input matches with guess number, the program will display a message, good work. So again, right here, we're already seeing that we're going to use an if statement, right? A conditional. Otherwise, else, display a message, not match, right? So there are a couple of ways we can approach this, right? I can decide to use a form field and use DOM manipulation. I can decide to use just asking the user for inputs directly on the browser, right? So I don't know if I show those. There is what we call the prompts, right, in JavaScript or in the browser. So if I type in prompts, just say, what is your name? If I save this and I save that and load the browser, if I go to the browser, oh, okay, we can't see. Can you guys see this little alert window on my screen?
No.
Okay, so I can't use prompts because Zoom is not showing the pop-up on my screen. So basically what prompt does, it just kind of brings in a window for the user to just answer a question, right? So it's obvious I can't use that for this exercise. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a form field on the page and add a button. So whenever the user clicks the button, the program runs, right? So let me just read the problem again. Write a JavaScript program where the program takes a random integer between 1 to 10. The user is then prompted to input a guess number, right? So if the user inputs matches the guess number, the program will display a message, good work. Otherwise, a message not matched will display, right? So we're going to create one form field with one button. Then we're going to write maybe output. We're going to have an element here named output where we can just show either good work or not matched, right? Again, there are a couple of ways we can approach this. So let's see one of the options we can use. So I'm just going to go to my code and rearrange this form to just have one form field, a submit button, and an output element, right? So if I go to my HTML, I'm going to take out second number, save. Let me just see. Let me take this out. Say, okay, I can name it guess number, right? Rather than first number. So that's what I was looking for. I'm going to name my first field guess number. Okay. Guess number, right? Then I'll take off one button. I hope everyone understands what I'm doing. This is HTML, right? I will change the text to, let me see. Check match. Let me just write check match or matches, like, okay, match. So match your number and whatever the system guessed, right? So it's just like a guessing guess number. So the system already has a random number from 1 to 10. You're going to put your number and try to match both of the numbers, right? So then the last field I want is a display on output element, right? So I'm just going to name it Vmax or results, right? Let's just leave it as output, right? We all know what that is. So I've created a little interface for our little game, right? As you can see, where the program takes a random integer between 1 to 10, right? So our program is going to automatically guess a number by itself between 1 to 10, and the user will input a guess number, right? And when the user clicks on match, it's going to output if the user got it correctly with good job, good work, or if the user fails it, we're going to display not matched, right? So I have my little interface for that. We're just going to go into JavaScript to see how we can get this to work. So I'm going to go to JavaScript again. The first thing we want to do is get HTML elements because we are using the DOM to display this, right? So if we're using the console, we can just maybe just console.log stuff, right? I want to get my guest number. So I'm just going to go to HTML and name it, instead of first number, let me name it guest number, right? I'll come to my JavaScript and const guest number equal to get an element by ID, right? Yeah, not value yet. Then I am going to get my button. So I'm going to say match button. So this is just basically all we've talked about from Tuesday, right? Or Monday, DOM manipulation. I'm just trying to get my element. So I'll just duplicate this and say, call this match button. Document.get element ID match. So the last thing is our output element, right? So I'm just going to go to here we have output and get our output elements. I'm going to name it results. No, output elements. Output. Basically, what we've just done is I've gotten these 3 elements. What's this? I'm going to take this off. I've gotten the 3 elements we're going to use to play around with our little game, right? So again, let me go back and read the question so we see what we want to do. So write a Java program where the program takes a random integer between 1 to 10, right? So the first thing we want to do is to create a random integer, right? So I'm just going to go to my code and create a random integer, right? To do that, I don't know if we talked about random. So I said, yeah, I talked about math and random, right? So rather than we guessing or hard coding, let me say let's CPU random number equals, rather than hard coding 8 here, right? So maybe if the user plays 8 times, the user will for sure guess what our computer's random number is, right? Or rather than just saying 2, to just take the user two guesses to just get our number, right? So JavaScript provides some math functions or math utility methods to play around with numbers and random, right? So there's a topic called JavaScript random, right? So this class or this method, math.random, right? So if I just go to my console and do math.random, see small letters, it's just going to automatically generate a random number between 0 and 1. Yeah, so I think the highest is 1. Let me just check to confirm that. Yeah, so math.random returns a random number between 0 inclusive and 1 inclusive, right? So with this, we can create a game or maybe a variable that changes the value every time, right? It doesn't return the same value, right? So math.random is what we're going to use, but we're going to, our program says where the program take an integer between 1 to 10. So let me just look for a way to kind of math dot returns a random integer from 0 to 9, right? So this little function here makes our random function return between 0 to 9. So I think if I want to do 1 to 10, let me see. I want to see 1 to 10, right? So it already has an example for me here, right? So I don't need to know how this works, but I know math.flow kinds of brings something. It removes the decimal place, right? But basically, I don't need to know how math.flow, math.run times 10 plus 1. This is just math stuff, right? I don't know how it works, but I know if I hadn't seen it here, right, I would have just Googled maths generates random number from 1 to 10 JavaScript, and it's going to give me that same. I think it will take us to W3 schools, right? Yeah, it's going to take us back to W3 schools. So I'm just going to copy this and give our CPU random number that function, right? So rather than hard coding 8, 5, or 9, and the person was going to play 5 times and guess the number correctly, right? So we have a variable that has a random number whenever this program is being clicked, right? Or whenever the program is being run. So I'm just going to go back and see. Right now, we have our elements, we have our match button, and we have our random number, right? The user is prompted when the user is then prompted to input a guess number, right? If the user inputs the matches with the guess number, the program will display a message, good work, right? So we're going to add an event listener, right? So I could not use the prompts because you guys can't see my little window. So we're going to add an event listener to this button. So whenever the user enters a number and clicks on match, we are going to run our program. So again, the same way we've been doing event listener, I'm going to do match button.add event listener, click. Okay, function. So this is the syntax for our event listener, right? So if I can just test this, I'm going to do console.log. So if I go, okay, let me take out this mat.floor and I click it, it's going to console high. So right now we have our game working, right? So first thing I'm going to do, right, on click of this button, I want to get the value of whatever my user enters, right? Like we did for our last game yesterday, first number and second number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, let user guess. Remember, this is a variable, you can name it anything, equals guess number dot value, right? So again, to explain why I'm getting the value of the element here, right? So I think I fell into an issue yesterday, is if I had done guess number equals get element by ID guess number dot value here, right? So this will get the value. Whenever this page is run, it will automatically take the value of empty, right? So JavaScript runs or reads your code or file immediately the browser loads, right? It will just pick the value of whatever is here, and at load time is empty. So we want to pick the value when this button is clicked. At that point, the user might have entered data, right? So I'm just going to take that off and have our user guess variable inside our event listener, right? Again, another reasonable thing to do, right? If you can see this, our random CPU number, right? Based on what I've explained, it's only going to run once. It's only going to generate a random number once, right? So once the page loads, if I use this in here now, it's going to, let me just do console.log CPU random number, right? If I go back, refresh, and click match, it's going to console log 4. If I match again, it's going to keep on using 4, right? So our program is going to use 4, and it defeats and the aim of making our program a little bit difficult, right? So again, to use this variable, I'll have to put it in the event listener, right? So whenever the button is clicked, the computer generates another random number, right? So if I save this, go back, if I click on match, it's going to display 10, match 8. As you can see, we are getting different random numbers between 1 and 10. I'm not sure anyone is going to get this, right? But okay, but 10 is not that large. So as you can see, we've done like 50, 60% of what our program asks us to do, but we've not kind of gotten into comparisons and if state and conditionals, right? So again, just to clarify, if you're building something that requires user inputs or getting values or whatever, and always make sure you put it in an event listener, right? Whatever you write on your global scope, right, on the direct file, gets run immediately after or immediately the page loads, right? It will just pass everything and run it. So if I have all this outside, it's only going to do it once. Let me see if I can push this outside. That's me duplicating. Yeah, so if I have CPU random number, user guess value, and console log random number, it's just going to give me 6. I can't even kind of console log it, right? So, and we're going to be able to use it once. So I hope that is clear. Yeah, so I'll just go back, read the question and see what to do next, right? Program where the program takes a random integer, done, from 1 to 10. We've done this. The user is prompted to input a guess number. We have a field for the user to input a guess number. If the user inputs input matches with the guess number. Okay, so this is our first conditional statement, right? So I'm going to take this console log off. I want to check if user input matches our guess number. Okay, so again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use our conditional statement, right? So if you can remember, we use comparison operators in conditionals, right? So what do we want to check? If user input matches our guess number, like it's straightforward, right? So if what's our user input, user guess? Okay, let me change it to user input in our case so that to be more descriptive, right? So if user input matches, like matches simply means equal to, right? Equal CPU random number. Okay, so this is a clear example of the conditionals we'll be talking about. In our case now, we want to know if this guy or the user got our computer's random number. So if user input is equal to CPU random number, right? What should we do? The program will display a message, good work. Okay, so our program, we have an invisible field with an output where we can manipulate it with the DOM, right? So previously, I might just do stuff here, right? So right now we are going to actually do stuff. So if the user input matches the random number, I want to display a good work text, right? So remember we have an output element. I'll just say output element dot inner HTML equals to good work. I hope it's good work actually. Yeah, good work. Otherwise, display a message not match, right? So otherwise means else, display a message not match. So I don't have to do any other else if. I'm just going to do if it's false, then output element dot inner HTML equals to not matched. Try again next year, right? So not matched, right? So as simple as it is, I even thought we were going to use loops, but we did not get to use loops. So we have used conditions, comparisons to build a little conditional game, right? So if I save this now, I hope this works on first try. If I save this now, go and try to test. So if I refresh, guess number, I guess 2. So mind you, whenever I click this button, the computer will automatically generate a random number and compare it with my own number, right? So if I click on match, not match. Okay, so let's do something, right? Let's be seeing what the computer gets. So we'll actually test our game, right? So console log CPU random number. So right now, I'm going to see what the computer gets, and I'm actually going to see mine. So if I put in 5 and click on match, so the computer gets is 1, not match. If I put in 2 and click on match, computer gets is 5, not match. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to actually get the guess, but again, we get the point. This is how we can use connect everything we've learned to build little stuff. And again, all these are still basic, right? We can extend this in a whole lot of way, or we can just do more stuff, right? Let me see if I can guess this number 3. I'm not sure I can't. I'm just going to take all of our time. Okay, so with 17 lines of codes, trust me, I can make it shorter, right? But I'm just trying to be descriptive enough. We've solved this issue, right? So this is how you can just maybe create interactive applications. You can do a whole lot much more cooler stuff than this, but again, you get the point. Stuff like this just helps you think and just makes you apply what we've learned, right? So I said I was going to send this yesterday, and I did it, right, because I wanted to add some stuff. The ones I had were very easy stuff, so I added 1 or 2 of the difficult stuff that's going to make you think from here, and I'm going to share it. In fact, I've downloaded. I'm going to share it immediately after this class, so you can practice. And I think you can use your GitHub and submit, but I'm going to show you how to submit, right? So we're done with our little program. If anyone does not understand anything we did here, or just has any little question, I think I'm going to ask us to expand this, right? So we're going to expand on this little program we've built. But before that, if anyone has any like questions on maybe a syntax we used or something we used or wants to contribute, you can just raise up your hands and say and ask a question. Okay, hi Sarah.
Yeah, hi, Sammy. So if you go back to the function, the function, when you were trying to get the good work, I was thinking that you were probably going to use event. I think the only reason you didn't use event is because you're not trying to grab something that the user put it, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So the reason I'm hard coding good work as a string is I'm not trying to maybe get maybe a text from somewhere. So I know what I want to show if it's true, and I know what I want to show if it's false. I can extend this and say let's like call it fruits, or I'm looking for the right word. Let's correct guess text. So as to not hard code this equals good work, right? Then let's incorrect guess text equals not match, right? So, and just put in the variables instead, right? So the reason I'm not maybe getting this text from somewhere is because the question or what we're asked to do gave us the actual text to use if it is correct or if it is not correct, right? So I've extended our application to use just variables now.
Yeah, I think also like because we're using HTML at the same time as JavaScript, I'm getting confused because normally I would just say return, right? Return.
Yeah, okay, if that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yes.
So true, correct. So it's because we're using HTML, we want to output the HTML, that's why we're manipulating the DOM. So basically, if you're doing other stuff that doesn't have HTML, you can return or maybe output or console log.
Console,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Adekule.
Hello, Sammy. So when I saw the question, the first thing that came to my mind was like, we're going to use the loops. Is there a way, do you think using loop will work in this situation?
I don't think so, right? There's no way you can as well try to stress yourself and loop through maybe, there are different ways to solve a problem, right? But using loops will be so hectic, right? So write a JavaScript program where the program takes a random integer between 1 to 10, the user then inputs. I'm thinking of how you can use, I don't think you can use loops, right?
Oh, okay, I see.
You can't, it won't be advisable to use a loop. Let me not even do that.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's an exercise here that will require you to use loops, right? So I'm sure this one will require you to use loops. The sum of two giving,
Okay.
So yeah, you can use loops to solve some issues, but this one was very straightforward, right? And the solutions were right in the example, the exercise.
Thanks.
Okay, so no other person has any question, right? Yeah, so
yeah,
fine.
Hi, Sammy. Sorry, I did not raise my hand. This is Ben.
All right.
Yes, so I just want to be sure, like the event handler, are we going to be using the on-click, most of the time, so that I know we have different types of, event handlers. I just want to be sure the particular one that we are most likely are going to be using.
So for your case, 90% of the time you're going to be using on click or click add event or click events, right? 90 might be too large. 80% of the time you're going to be using on click or click, because majority of what you want to be doing requires on the click of a button, right? So it's maybe if you are an actual front-end engineer where you have to, your responsibility is to do other stuff, yeah, then you'll be working with on mouse over, on this one, on browser, enter, on load. But for our case, you're going to see on click a lot, and you're going to be using on click.
Oh, okay, thank you. And also, yes, I saw somewhere, when you talk about data types, the Boolean, the string, the numbers, and all that, right? They call them primitive, right? So yes, and I think they call the object data type non-primitive, right? Do you have an explanation for that? I've not really looked that up, but so I just thought maybe I should ask you if it's something you can provide context to, right?
Yeah. So this doesn't even bring up primitive data types, right? Because it's a little bit advanced. So primitive data types are just like kind of like JavaScript inbuilt data types, right? So if I go to MDN primitive types, right?
Okay.
So in JavaScript, primitive data types are not primitive data type is data type. It's data that is not an object and has no methods, right? Let me see examples. I think. So, boy, I'm very sure I know what I understand about primitive data types, right? They are the strings, numbers, booleans, Boolean, and symbol, right? So,
Yeah.
except for null and undefined, all primitive values have object equivalent that are wrapped around primitive values. So basically, right, my understanding of primitive data types, they are strings, numbers, and booleans. Like those are the default. How I understand them mainly they are the default like kind of JavaScript data types, right? So
Okay.
there might be other explanation, but this is like a little bit advanced or further than whatever we are doing here, right? So I won't just want to go deep into it for now.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
The W3 schools did not even mention it.
Yes, I didn't see it in W3 school, right?
That's why I said it's basic enough to get beginners like off, right? So it doesn't have any complex stuff.
All right, thanks, Ami. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to share this. Whoever wants, you guys can maybe play around with it or just extend on it, expand on it. There are a couple of things you can do. You can maybe put a little description here and tell the user what the game is about, what he can do. You can come here, increase the guess. You can put 100, but I'm not sure anybody will be able to get it if you put it at 100 and just play around with it, but I'm going to share it after this class. Then let me see. Okay. I'm just going to just use 5 minutes. I wrote down math and random. I'm just going to use 5 minutes to talk about date because I don't think I've kind of talked about it at any point in time, right? Before we go, we just have 20 minutes. So you might have seen me use, maybe if I'm trying to do something I'm going to do, I think someone also asked me new date. So the same way we have maybe syntaxes for variables, functions, and classes. Okay, we've not talked about classes and objects. JavaScript provides a way for you to get, it's called the date object, right? A way for you to get the current date at that particular time you ran this code, right? So if I type in new date and wait 1 second and type in new date again, it's going to return a slightly different time, right? So the date object just gives you the ability to get the current date. It gives you the day, the month, the date, the year, the time, seconds, time zone, and daylight saving time, right? So this is just, like I said, with the maths and random. In fact, all programming languages, right? I don't think any of them leaves you to do most of the stuff from scratch. They provide some utilities that you can just use to work, right? And dates, JavaScript date objects are one, right? So you can access the dates at any point in time in your program with new date. So this is the syntax, right? New dates. So you can by default, JavaScript will use the browser's time zone, right? And display a date as a full text string. So we saw something similar to this. Okay, they are calling the same command. I got scared. They are calling the same command. So it's picking my exact time and what was it called? Yeah, it's picking the current time. So this is 29:35. If I refresh this page now, it should change to, where is it? Yeah, so it's changed to 9:37, right? So they are calling new date here, displaying this. So basically, you don't need to learn. Their date is a little bit more complex, but what you just need to know is whenever you're writing programs, you can do new dates and have access to dates. Then, like other data types, right? Like we have string methods, object methods, dates, the date method. So let me just save this in a variable, right? Let's today equals new date, right? So the same way when we had string methods, array methods, and object methods, the dates object has its own method, right? So if I want to, there are a couple of them. If I want to maybe make this readable, right? So you don't want to display this to a user if you are building an app. You want to display maybe this so contract was signed on this day, right? So it has some methods to use to format the date, right? I can get the year dot get year, right? I can get the day dot your month today dot get month, right? So all these are methods, and I'm very sure most of us, all of us are comfortable with what maybe dot method dot function is, right? All these are methods on this data type or on this object, right? So again, you can create a date with new dates. You have methods to play around with the dates. You can format it to a readable text. You can maybe get the year. Okay, if it returns the year from, I've forgotten where the time starts counting from. You can get the month, you can get the day, and so on and so forth, right? So let me just kind of go to where all those methods are used. Previous century, you don't want to be getting the previous century, right? So like I said, it's a little bit concepts, but I'm looking for what you're going to need. Okay, so this is how JavaScript outputs dates. It works with ISO dates, but you can pass it to read exactly, like to output readable dates, right? Let me see. No. This are two. So that JS date gets methods, right? So this is what I'm looking for. So these methods can be used for getting information from a date object, right? Get full year, get the year as a 4-digit number. So let me just try get full year. Previously I did get the year. So today dot get full year, right? So it just returns our current year, right? Previously it was returning the year from when I don't know. So again, you're going to you might get into some instances where you need to use maybe what year is this, what date is this. So with JavaScript date object, you can virtually get everything you want about a date, right? You can get day, you can get time, milliseconds, second, and minutes, and stuff like that, and just play around with them. Again, all this might just look like maybe static methods, right? There are problems that you need to solve. Okay, yeah. For example, so look at this. Write a JavaScript program to find 1st January is being a Sunday between 2014 and 2050. This is so complex, right? I don't think I can even try solving this right now. So with stuff like this, you have to play around with date, right? And I saw another one, write a JavaScript program to calculate days left until next Christmas. So that is where JavaScript dates comes in, right? You're going to have to kind of know how to play around with this, do some calculation, minus, plus, and get what you're looking for, right? So I just wanted to introduce you to the date object, and you can just come here and play around with I've used some of these methods, right? You can just come here and play around with the methods and see the output. I am going to try to maybe later on create, maybe in our tutorials, we're going to work with how to maybe use dates to kind of build programs, right? But for now, I did not include it. I didn't include in any of those exercises, but you can just, in your free time or your practice time, just come around and play with dates, okay? So I wrote down dates, math, random. I've talked about math and random. I'm just going to go back again. So math just gives you, the math object gives you a whole lot of things, right? Pi is always constant. You don't want to be cramming or kind of hard coding pi, right? So JavaScript gives you pi by default. It's a constant. It doesn't change. It's not a random pi. So the math object, what the math object just does is maybe you're building a calculator app or something. It gives you functions that you can use to kind of play around with math operators, right? So there's a square root, right? So maybe in your program, you don't need to be doing maybe the input, maybe 2 times 2 or 2 raised to the power of 2. I think I can do that with 2 exponential 2, right? Yeah, 4. So 5 exponential 5. Yeah, so but you have a function math the square root. Okay, yeah. You have a function square root and all with the whole log and stuff that does that for you in math. So I won't go into this because it involves calculations and some math stuff, right? So, but you can just play around with this and see how they all work. Okay, so I think I've gone over everything. We created a little application that kind of helped us apply loops and comparisons with Boolean values, right? Sorry, not loops, conditions, comparisons, and Boolean values, right? I'm going to share this after the class, and I'm going to share the function practice exercise that I want you guys to do. Then maybe you can expand this, play around with this, and you can, okay, a fun way you can expand this, right? You can check if the user, let me just write it here. Check if the user input is empty, right? And return a different response, right? So you can just do that here. You can check if maybe the person did not input anything. So you can do, remember, I said if a form field value is empty, right? So let me just console log user input. So if I click on, without typing anything, if I click on match, it's going to be an empty string. So this 4 is, let me comment out our CPU random number so it won't confuse us. So if I click on match, it's just going to like it's an empty string. So this is an empty string, right? But you're going to output out nothing. So you can check if it's maybe if user input equals nothing or nothing, do stuff, just change the output and just play around with the like kind of game and just console something different, right? So I'm going to share both of these after this class. Okay, so does anyone have any question relating to DOM events, what we've done so far?
Yeah, this is Ben again.
Hi, Ben.
Yeah, hi, Sammy. Yeah, I just want to take you back again to the event handler. And I believe event handlers are associated with HTML elements, right?
Yeah.
All right, so it's always going to be written there, okay?
Yeah.
All right, and so I'm trying to like bring it back, right? Even without looking at the code. And it's going to be like we have the HTML element, then followed by the event handler, whatever we want to do, in this case on click, for instance.
Yeah.
And okay, and then okay, if you can, you just go over that again, please, just to bring it all back, right?
So let me just show you the syntax, right? So
okay, event handler or something.
Add event listener, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's the right one.
I'm looking for the template. There's a way it's just listed out syntax. Just give me 1 minute. Let me see. Not this. Okay, so basically this is the syntax for it, right? Element, this is the method, add event listener. Then it's a function. It takes in 2 parameters. It takes in the name of the event you want to call and a function, right? So yeah. I'll just need to put it out here. the element dot the method add event listener. Then the events can be anything. It can be mouse over, then a function or an action to perform whenever that event is fired. So this is syntax.
Okay. Yeah, yes, it's coming back. Thank you. You're just trying to learn without going back to the video,
Okay.
right? Thank
Thanks.
you.
Hi, Enobo. Hello, Enobo, you have your hands up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. I think when you showed where we could get the exercises, I really didn't take note. Please, can you show me?
Okay.
Practice exercises, yes.
So I kind of wrote out, like copied out the ones that I feel, or I'm sure everyone will be comfortable with, will solve a little, it will be a little bit challenging, right? So this has many exercises that are way too complex for now, right? So I can share this link if everyone wants. I'm just going to, please, can you just mute? I'm just going to share it, okay, in case anyone wants to just come here and read, just play around with the program, right? But I just picked out, I picked out the ones that everyone can solve, but I just shared the link in the chat now. You can check it out. Are you there, Nobong?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
So I shared the link in the chat, so everyone can just go there and see if you can view some other stuff there. But they are intermediate to beginners intermediate challenges. Okay, so that should be all right, Enobo.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So anyone else has any question before we go? Okay. So I think I'm going to stop here. I'm going to share the two files I promised to share this night. Then we'll see you again tomorrow, and we'll look at other stuff tomorrow. So yeah, thanks everyone, and good night.
Sammy.
Hello.
Please, it's Shalom speaking. Please, I have a question.
Okay.
Sammy, please, tomorrow are you starting something new?
I won't.
Okay, so are we going back to what you've been doing all this week? Are we throughout this week?
Yeah, I'll go back to, like, I'll look for an exercise we're going to solve tomorrow. Then I'll go back to teach concepts we're going to use. So that we're just going to doing that and be solidifying what we're learning.
Okay, no problem. Thank
You want a new topic?
No.
All right.
Good night.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks, Grace. Good night.
Thank you.